Hello, welcome back to Planet 40k. Today we're venturing off into something a little bit different. We're going to be doing a tier list for the Necron Forgeworld models that are available for the Necron Force. Now, of course, you're not going to find these in the Necron Codex because they're going to be in the Imperial Armor Compendium book as their Forgeworld units. Before getting into today's tier list video, I just wanted you to lend your ears to this video's sponsor, which is the Magnet Baron. They specialise in custom magnets and custom stands for your models played on the tabletop. Now, we previously mentioned the small and medium posable stands in the Necron video we did last week. Now, this time I wanted to show off one of the specialised kits, which is a custom made kit for the Doomsday Arcs. As you can see from the images here on the website, it comes with a flight stand kit as well as a rock anchor. So the kit will consist of all the magnets that are going to be the correct size for the Doomsday Arc, so you don't need to worry about your sizes. And you can see from the image how these magnets are going to sit. And to add to this, you're going to get the rock anchor, which will hide all these magnets from view, all while giving the appearance of being a base terrain feature. Now, so often you find that these stands are getting snapped due to transporting the models. So by magnetising your models with these custom kits, you can simply pack your models away so much easier without the actual stands getting snapped, which is obviously much safer when transporting to your games. Now, a link will be in the description, or simply find them on your search engines by typing in the Magnet Baron. They've got plenty of other tabletop bits and bobs, so check them out. That's the Magnet Baron. Link will be in the description. And back to the video. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to have a tier list here. As you can see on the screen, there's going to be 5 tiers: top tier, high tier, mid tier, low tier, and dead tier. And we're going to be placing each of them into the tiers. We're going to talk about their summaries, and this will be compared to the rest of the 40k game. At the end of the video, I'll do more of a comparison of how they compare up to just one another, just the Necron stuff alone. But for this actual video, we're going to be comparing them to the rest of the 40k game as a whole there. So you can see all the units at the bottom there. You've got the Canoptic Canathrites, you've got the Gauss Pylon, you've got the Night Shroud, the Sentry Pylon, the Tesseract Heavy Construct, the Tesseract Arc, the Canoptic Tomb Sentinel, and the Canoptic Tomb Stalker. So let's begin the video with the Canoptic Canathrites. One of our fast attack options, 40 points ahead, get units of up to 6 of them. Very comparable to Canoptic Wraiths, but they've got the cutting beam and the void blade, so it's effectively like a power sword and a melter gun for every model in the unit. So I put down a little summary, as we always do, with the good versus the bad. So with the good, they're very quick with 12-inch movement, of course, because they're a fast attack option. They've got the fly keyword as well, so that's going to help with their movement. They're carrying, as mentioned, those melter gun and power sword options. I've dubbed them those weapons because they're quite commonly known, but the cutting beam is effectively a melter gun, and the void blade is effectively a power sword. They've then got the shadowed wings ability. It's a -1 to hit them at range, and they've got solid synergy with the Cryptek models because, of course, they're Canoptic units. The Technomancer in particular is going to synergize quite nicely. But as for the bad, there's no in-run saves. Canoptic units hit on a 4+, which I know all the other Canoptic units also hit on a 4+, but you've got to put it down as a bad. They don't have the Wraith form ability. They've not got that in-run save as mentioned, which I think is a massive downside to this unit, because the Canoptic Wraiths have got that Wraith form with the 4+ in-run save. It just gives them so much more resiliency within the game. They're actually 5 points per model more than a Canoptic Wraith, and they're also getting 2 attacks per model less than a Canoptic Wraith. And again, take into consideration that in-run save as well when you're talking about the points costs. Now, the Canoptic Wraith's melee is just so much better in my opinion. It's damage 2 as opposed to damage 1. So for me, just get Canoptic Wraiths is what I'm trying to say. And they're competing in quite a competitive spot with the fast attacks because you've got your Canoptic Wraiths as well as your Canoptic Scab Swarms as well. So for me, they're not dead. They're still usable. They've still got Strength 8 weapons at range and still got Strength 5, -3 AP weapons in melee, and they're still pretty quick. So they're still usable. I'm just going to be putting them at low tier for now. Next, we've got the Gauss Pylon. So this is a Lord of War model. This is the bigger version of the 2 pylons that we're going to be looking at today. 475 points. It's got that toughness 8 and 30 wounds. And of course, it's going to have that mega strength 16 focus beam as well, which has got 2d3 shots. So an average of 4 shots with that, and it's -4 AP, and the damage is d3 +6. So an average of 8 damage there. But unfortunately, it does have the blast keyword attached to that. And if you're firing at aircraft, you're going to +2 to the attack's hit roll, so you'll be hitting on the 2+ no matter what. So let's move on to the good and the bad for the Gauss Pylon. So it's got 30 wounds, toughness 8 as already mentioned. That focus beam is extremely powerful. That much damage coming from one mod is pretty devastating. You've actually got the option of deep strike in this thing as well. And you're probably wondering why you would bother, but it's because of the phase shift generator, which is a huge ability in my opinion. Because any friendly Necron models receive a 5+ invulnerable save against ranged attacks while they're within 6 inches of the pylon. And this is just any Necron models. Doesn't have to be a dynasty, could be a complete different detachment. So if you deep strike this into the centre of the board, where your warriors and whatnot, it's probably likely going to be going. So if you can get an in-run save for the majority of your army, that's going to be pretty decent. Now, as for the bad, it's going to be costing you 1 command point to fill because you need a super heavy auxiliary detachment, which then makes it very difficult to buff because they don't get the dynasty bonuses because it's an auxiliary detachment. But of course, it's not core either. It's not a Canoptic unit, it's not a Destroyer Cult unit, so you can't really buff this thing. It's doing its own thing. It's got no quantum shielding, which is a little bit of a surprise. Something costing you 475 points with a vehicle keyword, in my opinion, should have some sort of in-run save. Now there was a debate about whether the phase shift generator gives himself the 5+ invulnerable save. It's very arguable that it will, but for the sake of argument today, I'm going to say it doesn't. You've then got the fact that once it's deployed, there is going to be no movement whatsoever, because it then basically turns into a fortification, even though it's a Lord of War model. So it means it's very easy for enemy units to get out of line of sight. With obscuring terrain in 9th edition, it's not that difficult to get out of line of sight. And then further to add to the problems, it's got no melee attacks, of course, it doesn't fight back, and if it does get caught in combat, you're not going to be firing that blast weapon because you can't fire blast into combat. So that instantly means your focus beam, which is the big weapon on this Lord of War model, cannot be fired. So for me, I was debating whether this should go in the dead tier or not. You can't ignore that weapon with the damage D3 plus 6, especially when you got 4 shots with it when you're hitting on 3s as well. Even if this thing fires at a toughness 8 vehicle, it's on average going to be doing 17 to 18 wounds there, which is going to pretty much take away anything off the board. This is why I'm also going to be sticking this one in the low tier. I can't be sticking this any higher than that because it's just not mid tier, is it? But it's not going to be dead tier for me, so another low tier option. Moving on, we've got the flyer, which is the Knight Shroud. Now flyers aren't the most viable option at the moment in 9th edition because they can't hold objectives is the main reason. And you need as many models on the floor to hold these objectives, whether it's primaries or secondaries, as you possibly can. Now this one doesn't even have a transport capability, but we'll talk about that in the good and the bad section. So it's got fantastic movement, of course, going up to 50 inches at its top bracket, so it's getting virtually anywhere on the board, wherever it wants to go. Bearing in mind you've got that 90-degree arc because of the supersonic ability, and it's going to have all those other flyer abilities, of course, hard to hit, airborne, all those things. That are going to give it some sort of resiliency because it can't be charged unless the model's got the fly keyword, and the -1 to hit at range as well is not too bad. It's got toughness 7 as opposed to toughness 6 like the Night Scythe and the Doom Scythe, and it's also got 2 more wounds over those 2 flyers as well. We've already mentioned the hard to hit rule. Now the Death Spear bombardment rule is virtually one of the main reasons you're taking this thing. So once per battle in the movement phase, you can make a normal move over an enemy unit, and if you do so, you roll 3d6 for any vehicles or monsters within that unit, and then you roll 1d6 for any other model within the unit to a maximum of 12d6. And any rolls of a 3+, the unit suffering a mortal wound. So that is absolutely madness. Going against a single monster or vehicle, you're going to be doing 7 mortal wounds on average. And imagine going up against a unit of 3 Canathrites, you can literally take them all out in a single blow there. Now in terms of our Necron standards, that's pretty decent, but this is a once per battle thing, so once you have blown your load, you're only left with your Twin Tesla Destructor, which as we know, isn't the best weapon at strength 7, no AP, 1 damage. 6s of course get additional hits. It's not the strongest weapon in our arsenal. Now in terms of the bad, it's very difficult to buff. Just keeping up with the flyer, you're not going to be able to buff it that easily, and it's not a core unit anyway. Most things in the Necron book aren't. It's got no quantum shielding, which is a little bit of a letdown, and no min-1 save at all. So other than that -1 to hit at range, it's pretty much got no protection whatsoever. It's got no hover options like other factions have, where they don't have to go to that minimum speed of 20 inches and having that 90-degree pivot. It doesn't have any of that stuff. And flyers, as already mentioned, can't be scoring your primary objectives. Now it's got no big weapon like a Doom Scythe, and it's got no transport capability like a Night Scythe. So really, once you've actually shot the main weapon, it's pretty much done for the day. All you've got left is that Tesla weapon, which is only useful against certain factions. Now for this one, I was torn between the low tier and the mid tier, so I'll put it in the mid tier for now. Going up against certain factions in particular, especially with the current meta going towards toughness 3, weaker units such as Drukhari, for example, Sisters of Battle, Orc Boys, units that have got an in-run save perhaps but a poor armor save. So those Tesla Destructors with exploding 6s are coming a little bit more favourable as the game goes on. So for now, this is going in the mid tier. Up next we've got the Canoptic Tomb Sentinel, one of the 2 metallic creeper crawlies we've got going on in the fast attack options. 125 points for the model with 9 wounds, toughness 7. Think of it like a large Canoptic Wraith. Now in terms of the good and the bad for this unit, it moves quite quick at 10 inches, 9 wounds, toughness 7 as mentioned, strength 10 with the ranged attacks, because it's got the Exile Cannon. Now it's only 18-inch range, but it's heavy d6, strength 10, -4 AP, damage is 3, but it's got that blast ability which is a little bit of a hindrance. But strength 10 is always nice, especially on the move. It can shoot as well as fight, because not only has it got the Exile Cannon, it's got the Tomb Sentinel Claws, which are strength 7, -2 AP, 2 damage. So whether it's shooting at range or in combat, it's doing okay. It's also got the Gloom Prism, very similar to the Canoptic Spider, to assist on shutting down the psychic phase for enemy psychers, because you can try and deny one of the psychic powers as if it was a psyker. Which of course is going to pair quite nicely with the Canoptic Spider unit, or the Silent King for his anti-psychery. And then the last point there I put is that it's a solid Alpha Strike unit, it with a deep strike mechanic. Because it's only got an 18-inch range attack, coming in from deep strike could be the way to go. Now as for the bad, Canoptic units again hits on a 4+, not a 3+. It can't fly, it's got no inbound save. And I put here that the fast attack is mainly saved for Wraiths and Scarabs. They're your point scoring units for the secondaries, especially Scarabs in particular. And if you're playing on a smaller game, you haven't got much wiggle room to be putting in a Canoptic Tomb Sentinel as well as all your Scarab units. Now the range attack has the blast keyword, so it's going to be useless if it gets caught in melee, and it can't be obviously firing it into combat. And also that range attack is short range. That's a bad combination when you put those together. You need to get in short range to fire it, but then of course you're going to get caught up in melee. So it needs to stay clear of the fast attack units that are going to try and target it. And finally, it also needs a Cryptek to have some sort of use, whether it's a Technomancer or a Chronomancer. Both of those are going to work pretty well, but that is an extra tax for the unit. For me, this is a decent option. I'm going to be putting it at mid tier for now. I'm not going to put these in any order. I'm just going to put this in the mid tier after the flyer. Still very usable, and as I've already mentioned, having strength 10 on the move as opposed to staying stationary like most of our heavy support options do, it can be a real decent option coming from the fast attack slots there. Okay, next we've got the Sentry Pylon, which is like the Gauss Pylon's baby brothers here. These things are a lot cheaper in points. They're 100 points, but you can take units of up to 3 of them. Now they're not considered Lord of War models, they're considered fortifications, so you will need a fortification network in order to field them. Only toughness 7 this time and 8 wounds a pop, but do have some decent weapon options, whether it's 2 shots with the Gauss Exterminator at strength 8, or 1 shot with the Focus Death Ray at strength 12, damage being D3+3, which is quite nice. We don't get enough of that in the Necron book. But the one I like is the Heat Cannon. Now it does cost 25 points more, but it's heavy D6, strength 8, -4 AP, and the damage is D6. And firing at half range will be D6+2, so it's effectively like a melter weapon. Because this also has the dimensional translocation ability, you could be popping in from turn 2 onwards, firing out that heat cannon, getting into good range for that D6+2 damage, and you can be doing that with 3 models with a max unit. Now let's get on to the good and the bad. So it can deep strike, as we just said. You can get 3 of them, and they've actually got an ability to let them have a larger coherency, so they can have 6 inches. So you can literally line them all out in the centre of the battlefield, as long as they're within 6 inches of one another. That's going to be a large area space that these are going to be taking up, which will also provide some blockage for enemy units as well. They've got to go around, or they've got to get into engagement range of the pylon. Now they've got strength 12 with the D3+3 damage, which I quite like. But as mentioned, the 36-inch range heat cannon plus deep strike is a killer combination. That's the way I'd field them, all 3 of them coming in with the heat cannons. Now as for the bad, they're very difficult to buff. Very similar to the Gauss Pylon. They're not going to be holding any objectives due to being a fortification. They're going to be immobile, again because they're a fortification. They're not going to be fighting back once in melee. And then finally, they've got the deployment issues due to the chapter approved 2021 book, where fortifications cannot be deployed next to certain terrain features. So you've got to watch out for that one. Now for me, this is going to be placed very similarly to the Gauss Pylon. You don't see enough of these in the game at the moment. I think they're okay, but against other factions, I think they're just going to get absolutely smashed to bits. Once they get caught in melee, they're virtually useless. Because all the weapons are high strength, high damage weapons, if they get tagged by a small group of, say, Battle Sisters for example, you're not going to want to be firing strength 12 weapons at Battle Sisters as opposed to the larger targets within the battle. So next we've got the big one, which is the Syracuse Heavy Construct. This one's a whopping 650 points, but it's going to have 28 wounds, strength 8, toughness 8 as well to go on top of that. It is going to be a Titanic option, so it can fall back and shoot. And it's also got its own ability, which is also called Titanic, which allows him to fall back and charge. So this thing is very good in melee, and it's also very good at range. It's got a strength 16 weapon, which is the Canoptic Obliterator, heavy D3 shots, -4 AP, 6 damage as well each one. And you've actually got 2 of those instead of 1, so you should easily be getting one of those off. So let's take a look at the good and the bad bullet points then. So it's quite quick at 12 inches. Even with those high strength weapons, it's still pretty quick at 12 inches. It's got 28 wounds, toughness 8, it's got a 5+ invulnerable save with its containment field. I'm not quite sure why this isn't a 4+, but it's a 5+ invulnerable save. Weapons of high strength and high damage. It can shoot as well as fight. It's got the versatile weapon options. Now we only mentioned one of them, which is the strength 16 weapon, but if you wanted, you can take 2 singularity generators, which are strength 8, or 2 transdimensional projectors, which are strength 6, but you're effectively getting more shots because it's D6 shots per projector. It's then also got flexible melee options. It's got 2 different profiles with the Titanic forelimbs. It's either going to be strength 16, -3 AP, damage 5, or the Reaping Sweep, which is strength 8, -1 AP, 2 damage, but instead of having 6 attacks, you're going to be having 12 attacks. So plenty of damage coming out of this thing. And then we've already mentioned the Titanic ability, so it can fall back and shoot, and it can also fall back and charge. So it's always fighting first if it's doing so. And there was actually a mistake in the review we did. I was sort of downing upon the fact that it's got the blast ability on its range weapons, totally forgetting that it's a Titanic option, so it can simply fall back and shoot those blast weapons without any problems. So that puts it slightly up in my estimations, not too much because it's very expensive at 650 points and the command point, because you're going to use a super heavy auxiliary detachment, of course, unless you're going really big and you're taking a super heavy detachment, but that's going to then be 6 command points. Because it's got the Titanic keyword, it's got no quantum shielding, so it can be wounded on less than a 4+, although it is toughness 8. The containment field is a weird one because it isn't a 4+, it's a 5+, and you're not going to get any dynasty buffs. Again, with the auxiliary detachments, you get no bonuses whatsoever from your dynasties, so that means it's not going to have that much to synergize with overall. So when you're spending 650 points, there's probably better things that you can spend them on with other Necron models. I still think it's quite a massive threat if you're going to be taking one of these, but you're probably better off bringing a couple of Catan shards with 2 separate attachments. But for this video, I'm going to be sticking it in with the mid-tier options. I think it's still pretty decent overall, and it's going to be a massive threat to your opponent in the game. Okay, next we've got the Tesseract Arc. So it's a heavy support option which is coming in at 170 points, toughness 7 and 10 wounds. And it's got all sorts of versatility when it comes to ranged attacks. So let's check out the bullet points. So we've got the quantum shield and a containment field in Van Save. I'm not sure if that's a mistake. It's got the benefits of the quantum shield, so it can't be wounded on less than a 4+, but it's also got that 4+ containment field in Van Save as opposed to the 5+ quantum shield save. So the benefits of both worlds there. The main weapons are going to be working on any target type. If you're going against weaker horde units, you've got the particle hurricane. If you're going against, say, terminators, for example, those elite kind of units, you've got the seismic lash. And if you're going up against tanks and other vehicles, dreadnoughts and that type of thing, you've got the solar flare profile. All of them are -3 AP, but the strengths differ depending on the target. And then to add to that, you're going to either take a Tesla cannon, the Gauss cannon, or the particle beamers, just for some added extras. If it does get charged, you can auto hit in Overwatch by using that particle hurricane option, because it's effectively like a flamer. And it will always wound on a 2+, unless it's going up against a vehicle model, but strength 4, -3 AP, 1 damage, not too bad, with D6 attacks there. So lots of DACA overall. Now I've put here that it can move and fire its best weapons, unlike the other heavies. Now the Doomsday Arc or the Canoptic Doomstalker, they've got to remain stationary to get their best profile with their big weapon, whereas this thing can move and still fire to get its strength 8 solar flare weapon going off. And it's not going to have a blast hindrance either while in engagement range, because none of the actual weapons have the blast ability, which I think is a massive point for this thing. If it does get caught in combat, it can still fire all of its weapons into that combat. Then finally, it's going to be exploding on a 4+ as opposed to a 6+. Enemy units that have taken him down in melee have got a half a chance of taking some mortal wounds when it explodes. As for the bad, it's not core. There's not really much going to be buffing this thing. And I'm putting that it's only 10 wounds for 170 points, which I think is quite pricey. Normally it's 10 points per wound when you look at some of the other models, such as a Canoptic Spider, for example. It's 60 points, 6 wounds. So you would expect this to have a lot more wounds or just be a lot cheaper than it is. Now it's offering nothing in melee, so if it does get caught out in melee, apart from being able to fire into combat with its weapons, it can't be doing anything really. It does have 3 attacks, but it's just going to be at strength 5, no AP, 1 damage. Now going back to those other heavy options, the Doomsday Arcs and the Canoptic Doomstalkers, it doesn't match the range, because the range here is up to 36-inch range at best, and also it doesn't match the strength. It's only strength 8 as opposed to strength 10, so you could argue if the Doomsday Arc or the Canoptic Doomstalker does move and use its low profile, it's still using the same strength capabilities. Then finally, the main weapon is also unreliable with D6 attacks. Quite standard for us Necron players, we know that by now. For this one, because of its versatility, I quite like it, and I'm going to be putting it in the high tier for now. I think it is comparable to the Doomsday Arc as well as the Canoptic Doomstalker, and of course it's a little bit more expensive than the Doomstalker, but it's got so much more flexibility with those weapons, and being able to move around as well with the fly keyword just makes it a little bit more viable. Okay, on to the last one for this list. Then after this one, we're going to be looking at the final tier list that we've built, and then we're also going to be changing it up and seeing what it will look like going against just Necron units alone. So stick around to the end to see that, but this one is the Canoptic Doomstalker. This isn't one of your fast attack options, it's actually an elite option. It's 90 points, so it's a little bit cheaper than the Tomb Sentinel, but it doesn't shoot quite as well because it's only got strength 5 rapid fire weapons with a Gauss slicers. So again, it's quick, it's got that 10-inch movement, and for an elite option that's not too bad. 9 wounds, toughness 7. It can shoot and also fight. It's got that Gloom Prism again. We've already spoke about that, how it could pair with the Spiders or the Silent King, for example, to shut down those Psychers. It's also pairing quite nicely with a Technomancer because it's got the Canoptic keyword. Then to add here, it's got 2 more attacks over the Tomb Sentinel, and it's also slightly cheaper than the Sentinel by 35 points. Now the Tomb Sentinel has 4 attacks, whereas the Doomstalker has 6 attacks, and both of the weapons are identical. Strength 7, -2 AP, 2 damage. Now as for the bad, Canoptic units are always hitting on a 4+ again. You probably need a Technomancer to buff that one up. It's not got the fly ability, it's got no inbun save, it's not core, so it's going to be very difficult to buff this thing. The range attacks are nowhere near as good as a Tomb Sentinel. Again, 2 rapid fire, 2 weapons at strength 5, -1 AP, 1 damage is nowhere near as good as the strength 10 exile cannons that the Tomb Sentinel had. So other than a Technomancer and maybe a Chronomancer as well for the inbun save, not much else is going to synergize within your Necron Codex. So for me, I'm going to put it down into the low tier. I'm not saying it's the weakest one. I've not put them in order. It's probably one of the better ones of the low tier if I'm honest. I can't see this one making it up to the mid tier with those other units. So this is the final tier list that we built today, going up against other factions within the 40k game. So for me, the Tesseract Arc is the better option, followed by the Night Shroud and the Canoptic Tomb Sentinel, and of course that Seraptic Heavy Construct. Now if I was to take away the rest of the entire game, just to compare them with one another, this would how it would look. Of course something has to be at the top and something has to be at the bottom, but the two better options again, the Tesseract Arc and the Tomb Sentinel, they'd definitely be top tier, followed very closely by the Heavy Construct, and then at the bottom in the dead tier, those Canathrites are just not necessarily when you've got Canoptic Wraiths available, and obviously they're going to be much cheaper than going to Forgeworld. And then the 2 Pylons, although the damage output is pretty good, the fact that they can't move, they can't fight back, it's going to be a bit of a hindrance. So for me, that's how they would look when you compare them to other Necron models. So that's the video today, guys. I hope you found this somewhat useful. Drop a like on your exits and all that good stuff. Sub if you are new. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.